Harlan Joseph Beckett had operated Beckett's Fine Tailoring and Alterations on West Main Street in Lexington, Kentucky, for 31 years, occupying the same narrow storefront between a family-owned florist and a used bookshop that had been there even longer than he had, in a block of downtown that had managed to resist the particular kind of renovation that turns character into aesthetic and replaces the people who built the neighborhood with the people who discovered it later and decided to monetize the discovery. The shop was not large, a glass-fronted entrance, a long wooden counter, 3 fitting rooms behind a curtain in the back, and beyond that a workroom where Harlan spent most of his actual hours, surrounded by the tools and materials of a craft he had learned from his father and refined over 3 decades into something that the people of Lexington quietly trusted with the garments that mattered most to them. Not the everyday things, those went to the dry cleaner 2 blocks over, but the things that carried weight. The wedding dresses, the burial suits, the christening gowns handed down through families, the vintage pieces that could not be replaced and therefore could not be entrusted to anyone who treated fabric as a commodity rather than a record of someone's life. Harlan treated it as the latter, always, and the people who knew this told other people, and over 31 years a particular kind of clientele had found their way to the narrow storefront on West Main, the kind who arrived not because they had searched online for the highest-rated alterations shop in Lexington but because someone they trusted had taken them by the shoulder and said, quietly and specifically, that if the thing mattered, Harlan Beckett was the person you brought it to. He opened at 8 every weekday morning and closed at 6, and on a Tuesday in late April when this story turns, he had been at his work table since 7, finishing the hem on a bridesmaid dress that needed to be done by noon, moving through the work with the quiet efficiency of a man who had made the same category of precise movements so many thousands of times that his hands operated slightly ahead of his conscious attention, leaving his mind free to run at a lower frequency, not daydreaming, exactly, but resting in the work the way certain kinds of concentration allow. The shop bell rang at 9:17, and Harlan came out from the back workroom to find a woman standing at the counter holding something folded in her arms with a carefulness that told him, before she said a single word, that whatever she was carrying was not an ordinary garment brought in for an ordinary reason. Her name was Constance Marie Elliott, and she was 62 years old, and she had the look of a woman who had been managing things on her own for a long time, not defeated by it, but shaped by it in the specific way that solitude and responsibility and genuine love for the people you are managing things for will shape a person over the years into someone quieter and more careful than they might otherwise have been. She set the bundle on the counter slowly, the way you set something down when you are not entirely sure you are ready to let go of it, and she unfolded it, and what emerged was a wedding dress, ivory, long-sleeved, with intricate lace detailing across the bodice that spoke of real craftsmanship and real age. A dress that had clearly been made by someone who understood that the garment they were constructing would outlast the occasion it was built for. There was a tear along the left side seam, about 8 inches long, where the fabric had separated cleanly, not frayed, but pulled apart at the stitch line, probably from age and the particular stress of a garment that had been stored and retrieved and stored again over the years. Constance looked at Harlan across the counter and she spoke quietly, with the directness of a woman who had decided on the drive over that she was going to say the truth plainly rather than dress it up, because dressing things up took energy she did not have and time the situation did not allow. She told him that her daughter was getting married on Saturday, 4 days away, and that the dress had belonged to Constance herself, worn at her own wedding 38 years ago, and that her daughter had asked specifically to wear it, had asked months ago, and that Constance had agreed because the asking had meant something to her that she did not entirely have words for. She told him she had not noticed the tear until 2 nights ago when she took the dress out of the garment bag it had been stored in, and that she had not slept properly since. She told him she had $40, which she produced from her coat pocket, for $10 bills, folded together, and she placed them on the counter beside the dress and she asked him, without any decoration or appeal to his better nature, because she was not that kind of woman, simply and directly, whether he could fix the tear for what she had. Harlan looked at the dress. He picked up the edge of the tier carefully and examined the seam and the lace work nearby and the fabric tension and the weight of the material, running his thumb along the inside of the seam the way a doctor presses gently along a rib to understand the nature of a thing. The repair was not simple. The lace alignment alone would require patience and a specific kind of thread he kept in the back for exactly this category of work, expensive thread, the kind he ordered from a supplier in New York that charged accordingly. A proper repair, done right, done invisibly, the way this dress deserved, would take him the better part of 3 hours and would cost, in materials alone, something closer to $80 before his labor entered the equation at all. He looked at the $40 on the counter. He looked at Constance. Before he could respond, the shop bell rang again, and a woman entered who occupied space differently, not loudly, exactly, but with the settled, proprietorial ease of someone accustomed to being the most consequential person in whatever room she entered. Her name was Victoria Langston Reed, and she was 51 years old and lived in a house on Ashland Avenue that had been featured in a Kentucky Homes magazine 3 years ago, and she was carrying a cream silk blouse over her arm with the careful handling of someone who understood the garment's value and wanted to ensure that everyone nearby understood it too. She came to the counter and positioned herself in the particular way that people position themselves when they are not technically cutting in line but are making clear through their body language that they consider their business more pressing than whatever is currently being conducted, and she glanced at the wedding dress spread on the counter and then at Constance, and she said, to no one in particular but pitched at a volume that ensured everyone heard it, that some people simply could not afford the life they kept trying to arrange for themselves. And that it was almost admirable in a way, the persistence of it, though the word she used carried no admiration in it whatsoever, only the particular contempt that certain kinds of comfort produce in the people who have settled into it and forgotten what it cost or what it replaced. The shop went very quiet. Constance did not look at Victoria. She kept her eyes on Harlan, not in appeal, not in humiliation, but with the steady, self-contained quality of a woman who has heard worse and decided long ago not to give such moments more of herself than they had already taken. Harlan looked at Victoria Langston Reed for a long moment, not with anger, but with the full, clear attention of a man making a decision about what kind of shop this was and what kind of man he intended to remain inside it, and then he looked back at Constance and he said, simply and with complete finality, to leave the dress with him and come back in 3 hours. Victoria stepped forward and placed her silk blouse on the counter with the expectant confidence of someone who has never been told that their timing was inconvenient. She told Harlan she needed the blouse by end of day and that she was happy to pay the rush fee, whatever it was, that price was not the consideration. Harlan looked at the blouse briefly and then at Victoria and told her, in the same calm and unhurried tone he used for everything, that he was fully booked through the end of the week and that the earliest he could take on new work was the following Tuesday. Victoria's expression moved through several stages in rapid succession: surprise, recalibration, the beginning of an argument, and then something that recognized, in the specific quality of Harlan's stillness, that the argument was not going to produce the result she was accustomed to producing with it. She picked up her blouse. She left without speaking again, and the bell above the door marked her exit with the same plain tone it marked everyone's. Harlan turned the sign in the window to closed, which he did sometimes when he had work that required full concentration and no interruptions, and he carried Constance Elliott's wedding dress into the back workroom and laid it across his largest work table under the good light, and he looked at it for a full minute before he picked up his tools, the way he always looked at a piece before he began, because he believed that a garment deserved to be seen before it was touched, that the seeing was part of the respect. Then he began. He worked through his lunch break. He did not eat. He ordered the work in his mind before his hands executed it, the seam repair first, then the lace realignment, then the pressing, which had to be done at exactly the right temperature for this weight of fabric or it would damage the sheen. He used the good thread, the New York thread, because the dress required it and because the occasion required it and because Constance Marie Elliott had driven to his shop on West Main with $40 and the specific quiet courage of a woman who loves her daughter and was not going to let a torn seam be the thing that stood between the past and the future on Saturday morning. Constance returned at 12:30, 10 minutes before the 3 hours were up, because she was the kind of person who arrives early when something matters. Harlan brought the dress out from the back wrapped in a clear protective sleeve, pressed and perfect, the repair invisible in the way that the best repairs always are, not because the damage has been covered but because the work has been done so precisely and with such understanding of the original construction that the dress has simply been returned to itself, as if the tear had never occurred. Constance stood at the counter and looked at it for a long moment without speaking, the way people look at things when the relief is large enough that it takes a moment to become fully real. She asked how much she owed him, and Harlan said $40, and she looked up at him then, not with surprise, exactly, but with the particular expression of someone who is receiving something they understand the actual size of, even if the number does not reflect it. She counted out her 4 tens and placed them on the counter, and she thanked him, and the way she said it carried everything she could not say in addition to the word itself. Harlan folded the bills and put them in the register and told her that her daughter was going to be beautiful on Saturday, and Constance smiled for the first time since she had entered the shop, a real smile, the kind that rearranges a person's face entirely, and she picked up the dress carefully and carried it out into the April afternoon on West Main Street, and Harlan watched her go and then turned back to his workroom and finished the bridesmaid hem that needed to be done by noon. On the following Thursday morning, 9 days after Constance Elliott had walked out of Beckett's Fine Tailoring with her daughter's wedding dress, the shop bell rang at 8:45 and a young man came in who introduced himself as Nathan Cole Elliott, and he said that Constance was his aunt, and that she had raised him from the age of 9 after his parents were killed in a car accident on I-64, had raised him in her house in Lexington working 2 jobs and never once suggesting by word or expression that he was anything other than the center of her life and the absolute non-negotiable priority of every decision she made for the next 11 years. He said he was a commercial photographer based in Louisville now, that he had driven over for the wedding and had heard the story from his aunt over dinner the night before, the shop, the dress, the $40, the woman with the silk blouse, all of it. He said he had tried to pay her back for what she sacrificed for him over the years and she would not take it, that she was that kind of woman, that she never took anything she felt she had not specifically earned. He placed an envelope on the counter and he told Harlan that this was not payment for the dress had been paid for, and he respected that transaction, but that it was from him, personally, for being the specific kind of person his aunt had rarely encountered in her life, the kind who helped without calculating the return, without requiring something back, without making her feel the weight of the assistance in the way that assistance can sometimes be offered in a way that costs the recipient more than it costs the giver. Harlan opened the envelope after Nathan left. Inside was $2,000 in cash and a handwritten note on a piece of paper torn carefully from a notebook, and the note said that kindness without an audience was the rarest thing Nathan had ever witnessed, and that his aunt had cried telling the story, and that she never cried, and that he thought Harlan should know what he had done, even if Harlan had done it without needing to know. Harlan sat down on the stool behind his counter and held the envelope for a long time in the quiet of the shop on West Main Street, with the spring light coming through the glass front and the florist next door beginning to set out her sidewalk display, and he thought about Constance in her pressed coat with her 4 tens on the counter. And he thought about his father who had taught him this trade and who had told him once that the work itself was the reward but that the work done for the right reasons was something different again, something that accumulated in a person over a lifetime into something you could not spend but could not lose either. He put the envelope in his desk drawer. He turned on his work table light. He went back to work. The right thing done without an audience is not a smaller version of the right thing, it is the fullest version of it, the one that comes from the deepest and most honest place in a person, uncomplicated by the desire to be seen doing it. Harlan Beckett did not fix that dress because he knew someone was watching. He fixed it because it needed to be fixed and because the woman who brought it to him deserved to have it done properly and because 31 years of craft had taught him that materials and time given to work that matters are never wasted, regardless of what they return. The world has a long and accurate memory for genuine goodness. It does not always respond on your schedule, but it responds. If this story moved something in you today, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that doing the right thing in the small and private moments, the ones where no one would ever know the difference, is the very foundation of the kind of person worth becoming. Someone in your life needs to hear that today.